welcome to part 3, the final part of the build log for the A-1 Skyraider. In this part, we'll be completing the fuselage, attaching the wings, and doing the wiring inside to get the A-1 ready to fly. Let's get started. You may remember I mentioned that one of the points made, again, from the thread on RC Groups is that the space between these two halves of the elevator are really just a small piece of the EPO foam, and since we've only got one control horn, that means that that small piece of foam is going to have to bear the brunt of the push and pull. And while if we're flying fairly slow, that's not going to matter, you run the risk of stretching or fatiguing the foam because the pressure isn't going to be evenly distributed because of the gap there required by the rudder. So what I've done, in taking the advice of some of the people on the thread, is I've gotten my hobby knife and I've gone through and I've cut just the blade width of the foam down about 3.5 millimeters, 7 inches. So I've gone 1 inch either side of the two hinge pins here. And what I've done is taken a piece of carbon fiber strip, and what I'm going to do now that I've gotten that slit in there is I'm just going to press it gently into place vertically, not horizontally. And so I'm putting it in kind of like the blade of a knife. And it just slides right in there. The single cut, I didn't have to dig out any foam or anything. And I will notice is as I was making that cut, I could really see how that foam could fatigue. So I think this is one of the pointers on the groups that's probably well worth your time. It took only, a minute or two to make that slit, and so it fits in there very nicely. And then what I'm going to do, since this is EPO foam, you can use CA on it without using foam safe CA. And what I'm just going to do is use some thin CA and put a couple of drops along there so it isn't going to go anywhere. I've got it flat so it's not going to dry funny, and so I've got that in there, and it looks good. It's added a lot of strength. The next step is connecting the steering to the tail wheel, and so what I did is I used the servo tester and extended the retracts on the back so I can get to them. I've gotten the first one done. Let me show you how I did that. There's a coil of wire that comes with the kit, and it's already cut to length, and so there's really nothing much to that. And so what we're going to do is simply bring the wire through the steering bars on the bottom of the retract. Loop it through. I don't know whether it's from years of fishing or whatever, but I'd like to loop it through there twice. Use my forceps here, get that pulled through. And that's pretty much all there is to it. It comes with these little brass grommets, and the flat end of the grommet here is going to go on to the end of the wire. It's going to be the one closest to the end of the tail wheel itself. And what we're going to do is slide that other wire through there, like that. You're going to perhaps have a recollection of these little grommets because they're very similar to the sleeves that are often provided to mount servos into balsa. So I've got a larger needle nose pliers, so I'm going to come in there and then just crimp that down, put a lot of pressure on that baby, and then go up toward the lid or the cap of it and crimp it the rest of the way down. So we've got it on there, it's crimped, that'll hold it in place, and then I'm going to tie these two wires together on a little bolt and just drop them through the fuselage so I can get to them at the forward end when I connect them to the servo. So you can see, looking down through the top of that open hatch, that I've got the pull wires connected to the servo. The servo horn has a number of connectors on it, 2 for the pull, and then 1 for the control rod that goes aft for the rudder. You need to fish the wires through the fuselage, and I found that easiest to do by opening the speed brakes and guiding the wires through, and then not getting them tangled to the servo wire that goes back to the retract. So I took a couple of false starts to get that back there. And then make sure that you have them hooked up properly so that when the airplane is turning, that when the arm moves, that you move the tail wheel in the same direction as the rudder. So play with that just a little bit. I'm not all that keen on these crimping techniques. I've got them in there and they're crimped and so forth, but I may put a drop of epoxy or something on each of those when I have it exactly the way I want it to keep it from sliding around. So it was more of a pain than it probably needed to be, but it conceptually it's really easy to do. It's just in the confines of the hatch and snaking the wires through and making sure that the tail wheel is as closely aligned as possible was kind of a pain. We'll probably end up doing the final alignment of the tail wheel with the radio and then physically trim the rudder with the control rod going back to the rudder. So we're going to have to see how that works, you know, using twisting the clevis and so forth. The tail feathers for the A-1 screw in, and so you can see the mounting holes. I've checked to see that that plastic is secure. We'll just put the horizontal stabilizer in, put it on the hole there. Go after those screws. Okay, and then we've got the beautiful vertical stabilizer, that great paint job. It's just going to fit in the holes provided for it here. So we'll get that in there and just press that into place. It's a nice tight fit. Very nice, and with a little bit of a slot here. Let me turn that around so you can see right down in here. There's a slot in the fuselage for the rudder, so it gives the rudder kind of foam hinges down in this area. You maybe see from here down, and then the pinned hinges up here. So it's got a good firm connection. So let's pivot this on the stand so we can see the holes. Drop the screws in. Use a little bit bigger screwdriver this time. Okay, so now we've got the horizontal and the vertical stabilizer connected, and we spent just a couple of minutes checking out the spacing using the clevises that are screwed onto the ends. As you can see here for the rudder, let me pivot this right here, and I'm going to use the screw to back this. In this case, it's the elevator, and I'm going to have to back it up a little bit. So I'm going to be working on that, and then I'll apply the same thing with the clevis over here on the rudder as well. We've got just a couple of pieces that are left to put on the fuselage. So again, we'll get the contact cement out, and much the same as we did with the rockets, we'll just put a couple of drips of the contact cement along the bottom edge of this piece that has an antenna on it. And that's going to slide right into the hole right here. And the big UHF antenna, it's got some place for it to go in there too. And from what I understand and from just observing, it looks like this is going to be a nice little bit of a handle to pull the back of the hatch off. So maybe put a little bit more glue on that, because I'm going to be putting some pressure on it from time to time. We want that in there nice and tight. And last but not least, on the back, we've got this part here. I get a kick out of the instructions. It says insert the gun. And of course, you're not going to have a cannon shooting out of the tail. It's of course the pitot boom, having it out of the wind of the propeller and running the airspeed indicator and providing the pitot static source for the aircraft control. So we've got that in now. So that pretty much marks the end of the construction phase of the model. I'm going to put the wings on next, and we'll have a chance to see it all put together, and a couple of other. Push through both ends of that little plastic housing, and then into the mounting plates at the bottom. Again, you're screwing into plastic mounts, so you want them snug, but you don't want to strip out the plastic or the top of the screw. Okay, so we're ready to put the prop adapter on. I've got this little bottle of the blue color of thread lock, and I'm just going to put a drop of that on each of these screws as I put that in, because this is one of those things that I really don't want to come loose. And then they have little box ends or socket ends on the so I'm going to get these ready to go in, and the last one and then the propeller goes on. You can't really put it on the wrong way. You'll see here it's got a hexagonal detent on it that's going to fit on the end of the adapter, so you just kind of turn it until it snaps in, and then it goes on with a Phillips head screw right on the end. The airplane has a lot of nice scale effects, and so, but one of the things that was missing was a pilot. And so I went down to my local hobby shop and picked up a 1/6 scale military pilot from Williams Brothers. It comes molded in the color that you see his face, and I used just some craft paint to paint him up. And I think he looks pretty good there in the cockpit. I'll show you that in just a moment. I also purchased the 1/8, and that one looked just a little bit small. The airplane is about 1/10 scale. It's got about a 5-foot wingspan. The real airplane has about a 50-foot wingspan, and so I just ended up with a pilot that was going to be just a little bit bigger. But as you can see, I used just olive green for the flight suit, gave him a red scarf, white helmet, and some gray straps, and used a silver marking pen to put the buckles on his straps. I'll pan out here just a second. There you can see you can see his eyebrows and his mouth. I used a little light brown and some burnt umber to cover that. It's just a hint of color there. And these are just craft paints. You know, they're 99 cents or $1.10 at the Walmart or at the Michaels near you, and they worked very, very well. So here you can see Skyraider Bob sitting in his cockpit. He looks pretty good there. Trimmed the canopy. The trimming line is molded in the canopy, as you might expect. I'll use some canopy glue to put that down, but let me put it on here. There's a little glare, and I wanted you to see Skyraider Bob as he was sitting in his cockpit. Before we go in and look at some of the wiring in the cockpit, I wanted to point out a couple of things here that you're going to be seeing. First is we're using a switching battery eliminator circuit, and we're not going to rely on the one in the ESC itself. And so we're going to be using one like this one here. This is a Turnigy brand, up to 26 volts input, 5 amps output. So that'll give us a lot. This is just a little Park brand BEC, and that's going to work fine for small airplanes, but it's only got about 1.25 amp output. And so for that little foamy with a couple of extra servos, great safety feature. But for a big airplane where we've got, you know, 2 servos in each wing, 3 or 4 servos in the fuselage, you know, a bunch of them, we're going to want to have the safety of a separate BEC. Now, the other thing that I'm going to be pointing out to you is this. I was at an expo here just recently, and several of the vendors had these little guys, and this is really handy. It's just basically the socket end of a Dean's plug, the plug end to a Dean's plug soldered together, and then they've got a JST plug coming out of it, out of a molded plastic arrangement. And I've made these myself, and I don't like to solder or pain in the neck. So this is just a really handy tool, because what that allows you to do is to use a kit of little GST sockets like you get here. I got these from Hobby King. You know, you just pinch the wires in and put them in the appropriate end of the plastic plug, and then you can put these together. And so you can use this on multiple airplanes. And then it makes it very easy to connect the power supply to your BEC. And so that's just a really handy tool I just stumbled across, and I like a lot. The other thing that I do with my heavy airplanes is I use an arming plug, and as you can see, this is a Max product, and it's called a high currency arming switch with Dean's connectors. And the way this works is simply you plug the battery into this side, you plug the electronic speed control into this side, and then it uses a plug device like this in here to complete the circuit, which allows you then to completely isolate the ESC and provide you that element of safety, so you don't have to worry about, you know, knocking your radio over and jamming the throttle up and then having the propeller on the airplane you're working with spin up and injure you. The other thing I'll be pointing out to you when we take a look inside is I kind of doubled up on the safety and put a receiver switch in line 2 that I don't have laying out right here. But these are some of the things that we're going to point out to you in just a minute when we take a look inside the A-1. So let's talk a little bit about the wiring. We've got all of the wires coming up from the wings, as you can see, and it's kind of a rat's nest in there. But we've got, you know, the multiple Y cords, the double Y cord for the landing gear. All of that is right here in this area. I'm using an AR710 Spectrum receiver, so it's a 7-channel receiver, and so I have it set up with the gear. I have the flaps on aux1 and the speed brakes on aux2, so all of the channels are individually operated by various switches on my transmitter. Now here are some of the parts that I mentioned to you. First, here is that arming plug that I just pointed out to you. You can see I've cut a little hole in the side of the airplane, got some paint in there, and so that when the arming plug is placed in there, it's really not going to extend out into the airflow very much. So from this area, you've got the wire coming from the electronic speed control, which is down in front of this tray. And then you can also then see that I've got that adapter plug put in the circuit with the wire coming over, plugged in using the little handy JST kit that I showed you a moment ago, into the switching battery eliminator circuit that I've got loaded right here. Now on this particular setup, what I've also done then is taken the power from the battery eliminator circuit and added it to this switch. And this is just a receiver switch that you might see on a larger airplane, and I've just got it in line. And so I've got the power coming to the switch, and then from the switch I've got it going to the battery plug down there in the receiver. And so by turning the switch like that, and I usually turn it on going back in case it got hit by something when the airplane was moving forward, it won't turn it off. I've got that armed, the light would come on, and that would allow me then, when the battery's connected, to check my control throws and do all of that kind of thing, because this particular plug is not in, and so the ESC is not powered. Then when I get it out to the flight station, I can set it down without taking the canopy or messing with the canopy. I can just plug the arming plug in. The ESC will then power up, give me the little chirps that tells me that it knows what it's doing, and we're ready to go. And so that's what we've got in here, and I would highly recommend using a battery eliminator circuit rather than the BEC coming from the electronic speed control. Now, one of the other things that I probably should point out to you is that the throttle switch, which is down here, is the line coming from the battery eliminator circuit. And you can see I've got some little black tape there. And what I've done is I used a hobby knife to pry up the little plastic securing tab on that servo connector, and I pulled the red wire out. And so by pulling the red wire out, I just folded it back and taped it to this line, and that way I don't have power coming in from the BEC on the electronic speed control. It's all coming in here, so those two things aren't fighting each other here in the receiver. And so that's just one of the things that are often referred to. Sometimes people talk about cutting the wire. Yeah, don't bother about cutting it, just fold it back. It'll come out of there pretty easily. And then if you choose to use the ESC on another project, or if something happens that you're not going to use your external BEC, you just slip the pin back into the plug, and you're able to use it as it was designed. So that's the inside. There's one more construction pointer that I want to point out to you, and that is having to do with the hatch cover and the canopy and so forth. One of the things that I'd like to do, and I'll point it out to you here, is when the pulling end of the canopy is at this end, you're pushing on it pretty hard, you're pulling on it, you have your fingers are dirty perhaps, and you can start to collapse the foam trying to pull it off the top of the airplane. So one of the things that I like to do is to use a popsicle stick or an epoxy stirring stick, and you can see that I've got it extended out just a tad bit. It's like less than 1/8 of an inch. And then on the other side you can see that I've cut out the foam and then just glued it in there, painted it the same color as the model. And so that way when I put this hatch back on the model, you can see that it fits very tightly. There's just a very small nub, but when I come to take it off, I can just spread my fingers, grab those two little ends, and lift right off and easily pull the hatch off without crushing and damaging the foam there at the end or pulling the antenna out of the back of the hatch. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at the control surfaces. We've got those all programmed into the radio now, so you can see that we've got the ailerons moving there. The flaps on the wings, this is the 3-position switch on the Spectrum 7C, so this is position, the middle position, position 1, and then position 2. The 2-position switch on the 7C controls the speed brake, and so they all come out. You'll see that where the roundel is near the word Navy. And then on the tail, we've got the elevator and the rudder with the tail wheel steering down there below it. I hope you've enjoyed the build log for this A-1 Skyraider. It's been a really fun airplane to put together. The parts have come, fit well, everything that was supposed to be here was here, and everything that was supposed to work. And so it's been a fun model to work on. I want to thank all the people who have contributed to the thread, the StarMax 1600mm thread on RC Groups, because I've used a lot of their tips and a lot of their insights have made this build a lot easier. You can see some of my other video build logs on my YouTube channel at AZJim12. That's all one word, AZJIM12. There are a couple of other airplanes that I've put together and have some pointers there, so I hope you enjoy those too.